Bonjour à tous. Voilà. Donc, merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. Michter, est donc une distillerie du Kentucky qui fait à la fois du rye, du bourbon et aussi ce qu'ils appellent du mash bill, qui est un mélange à la fois de maïs, d'orge, et qui ne répond ni à ce qu'on appelle du rye, ni à du bourbon. Je sais que par modestie, ils vont vous dire que les principaux atouts du Kentucky, ça va être George Clooney, Johnny Depp et Mohamed Ali. En réalité, moi qui y suis allé, j'ai eu la chance de les visiter. Je sais que le principal atout du Kentucky, c'est Michter's. Je vous demande de l'applaudir chaleureusement, s'il vous plaît.
Well, thank you. I have no idea what he said, so bear with me. I'm very excited. This is the first time that I've been to Paris. I'm actually outside the state, so it's very exciting. It's very exciting to get to meet new people, and I'd be glad to meet after this too. So we're going to talk. We're going to taste some excellent whiskeys today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Michter's. My name, again, is Dan McKee. I'm Master Distiller of Michter's. We're a distillery out of Louisville, Kentucky. Woo! One hometown crowd, so anyways, is anyone in here familiar with Michter's or first time, or have you had our whiskeys before? Some? Okay, thank you. All right, so again, I just want to talk a little bit about our company. We have a long, rich history that actually it was a distillery in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, that dates back to 1753. Sorry, it's a little small, but in 1753, they were distilling rye whiskey. That was the prominent grain back then. In the 1800s, it was sold to Abraham Baumburgers, so it was Baumburgers. It closed in 1919 for prohibition in the United States. When it reopened in 1933, 1934, it changed hands several times, but by the 1950s, a gentleman named Lou Foreman became the owner and eventually named it Michter's after his two sons, Michael and Peter. Unfortunately, that distillery closed in 1989, abandoning all the labels, trademarks, and then our new owners resurrected the brand in the 90s and brought it to Kentucky. So that's where we're currently at. We're in Louisville, Kentucky. We actually now have two distilleries. We have our main production facility, and then we have a visitor center in downtown Louisville with a craft distillery, 2 pot stills, okay? There's that good-looking guy right there, okay? I started at Jim Beam as a distillery operator, so I started hands-on and then, promoted up. I've been with Michter's now 5 years. And I'm very fortunate. I've gotten to work with a lot of people with 10 years to 40 years worth of experience. So you can't buy that in the textbook, and it's been an awesome experience for myself. We're all about cost, wow, that's opposite. We're all about quality. We've got a cost be damn approach. We're a privately held distillery, so we can do things that maybe publicly traded distilleries can't do. No problem. And they're taking my whiskeys. The cost be damn approach. Our ownership's very involved, and we'll do things that are maybe not as efficient or cost more in the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about them here. Once everyone has their samples, we'll go ahead and start tasting whiskey. But again, our ownership, if it costs more, they're still willing to do it if it'll improve the quality, okay? You can see here we kind of just 6 pillars here. All of the wood staves for our barrels are air-dried, seasoned. We toast and char our barrels. We enter our distillate into the barrels at 51.5 ABV. That's the lowest of any distillery of scale back home. And then we heat cycle our warehouses, which we experience more angel share, so that's costly. And then we also do a chilled filtration. And I know that's subjective there, whether we should non-filter or chill filter, but it's something that we feel that really helps bring out and balance our whiskeys, the finest qualities. So You ready? All right, so the very first one is our, what did we start with? Okay.
Number 2 and number 4.
Yeah, number 4. We'll go ahead and put. Thank you. Is there any questions so far? I'm sorry, guys. I can start rambling, and I love what I do. So, okay. We'll go. I know everyone's ready to try one. We will here in a. So the very first one that we're going to try, number 1, this is our single barrel Kentucky straight rye. Okay. So all of our products are either single barrel or small batch. And again, single barrel, thank you. You have to have very consistent barrels, high quality and consistent barrels, day in, day out. We call this a Kentucky style rye, meaning we have a little less rye in the mash bill. So that additional corn and malted barley provide a very nice balance of sweetness and spice. Remember, rye whiskeys, they bring a little citrus, spice, pepper, versus what we call like an Indiana-style rye, which is known for 95%, very bold, spicy. Ours is very approachable. So if you would like to go ahead and try this and nose it and tell me what you think. It's fantastic. Just on the question was about the age in these first 3 here. They're typically aged between 5 and 7 years. Again, being privately held, we age to a taste profile. So if it's not ready, we don't release it. And nothing says that more than our upper marks, like our 10-year bourbon, our single barrel bourbon here. This is much older than just 10 years. That's just stating that it was the minimum 10. But very proud of it. So what do you guys think? The ABV on this is 42.4%. Okay. But you can see our whiskeys, we're looking for a very rich, full-flavored, nice mouthfeel, and a smooth finish. Our whiskeys are very smooth. And I'll talk about some more of that in a little bit here. But, we're trying to extract the caramels, the vanillas, spice, brown spice, and of course, toasted notes. Okay. So here's just a slide that all of our wood staves are air-dried seasoned a minimum of 18 months. When those wood staves are exposed to the elements, the snow, the rain, sunshine, the natural fungi that occur on the wood help break down the tannins that impart bitterness and astringency that we're not wanting into our whiskeys. So industry average is much less than at 18, and some products we have go all the way up to 60 months. All of our barrels are toasted and charred, and if you're not familiar with the toasting process, toasting is when they raise the barrel and have without the heads, and they place it over a small oak-fueled wood fire. And that low temperature and time helps break down the inner layers of the wood, allowing the whiskey to extract more. So like the hemicellulose layer with the wood sugars, the caramels, and the lignin layer that provides vanillin, it allows more extraction. And then we come in with a number 3 char. Not to overdo it. We don't want to damage those layers that we just spent all that time and energy preparing. So we come in with a char. So think about it in the barrels. We've got 4 basic chemical reactions going on. You have oxidation. You have the organic reaction of the whiskey to itself. You have the reaction with the wood. And then the char also acts as a filtering where it can remove maybe even some sulfur notes and so forth. Let's go ahead and go to sample number 2. This is going to be our small batch Kentucky straight bourbon, again aged between 5 and 7 years. Now, just like single barrel quality is in mind here. So small batch to us is the equivalent of 20 full barrels, truly small. okay? To me, this is a very nice classic bourbon. You're going to get the caramels, vanillas that you expect. And this is 45.7%, okay? Yep. What do you guys think? Do we have any big bourbon fans out here? Or is this something new? We got two over here. No? Is this new for people? Okay. What'd you guys think? I mean, do you experience those caramels and the vanillas that we're talking about? Okay. All right, so another very important step for us is how we enter the distillate. So back home in our distillery, our distillation system is 100% copper. There's over 5,000 kilos of copper in our system. Copper makes for a very nice, clean, but flavorful distillate. It helps remove some of the impurities, like, again, those sulfur compounds, so forth. We distill it twice. So we use a column still, a continuous column still, to a doubler pot still. Our column still is 81 centimeters diameter. It's 14 meters tall. So all of the grain, the liquid, the fermented beer goes through the column still. From there, our first distillation occurs, what we call low wine, and that's at 64.5 ABV. So then that goes down to our doubler pot still, and we distill that a second time, removing more impurities, increasing the proof all the way up to 69 ABV, okay? At that point, we send it back to the warehouse. It's got to pass all of the quality standards, and then we give the warehouse the green light to begin barreling. So to be a bourbon or a rye whiskey, some of the regulations in the United States has to be, for bourbon, more than 51% corn. To be a rye whiskey, it has to be more than 51% rye, right? It cannot be distilled over 80%. It has to be entered into the barrel 62.5% or less, aged in a new charred oak container, and bottled less than 40%. And you can only use water to cut the proof, either at the beginning or at the end, which leads us to one of the most important things that we do, but it's very costly. So I mentioned we distill at 69%. We actually cut that new distillate down to 51.5% when we enter it into the barrel. This is the lowest ABV of any distillery of scale. We're entering more water up front, which makes us use more barrels, but also it interacts with the barrels differently than, let's say, the industry average of 62.5%. It dissolves the sugars more readily, but it also, the polyphenols or phenolic compounds that come from the wood that are extracted, they're somewhat water soluble, and those cause the burn. So over time, it helps break them down, and that's why you'll see very smooth whiskeys across our lineup, whether you're a bourbon or a rye person, okay? And it's very important. Another thing is, after the aging process, our whiskeys come out about, let's say, 55%. We're only adding this much water to get it to bottling proof. Someone that went into the barrel at 62.5 may come out around 68, 69%. They're adding about 50% more water to get to bottling proof, okay? Which is, as a consumer, you're drinking a lot more water at the back end. At least the water in ours has the characteristics of the aging process, which is then allows it to be more rich, flavorful. And then also, if you're a bartender, when you're making cocktails, or even at home when you're making cocktails, think about it. You're diluting that spirit even more by adding water or ice, syrups, things like that. And that's why Michter's holds up very well in cocktails. We've seen a lot of bartenders really like using our product. So So anyways, any questions about this? I know that's a lot, but this is probably one of the most important things that we do. In the late 1800s, early 1900s in the United States, this was actually the gold standard, about 51% to about 53.5%. It was over time as we went through the 1900s, as the industry grew, they started using more barrels, and people wanted to look at how do we cut costs, and this was that's how they ended up at 62.5%. But we've elected to stay low for maximum quality. All right, so the very next one, if you guys want to, we'll go to sample number 3. This one is our a brand new one that we just introduced in September, and John, when will it be available? So it landed yesterday, I was told, and it'll be available mid-October. Don't hold that to me, hold him accountable. Okay. All right, so this one's a great one. This one is 43%. So if you've had if you've had our original sour mash whiskey, this is not a bourbon or a rye. In the mash bill, the corn, the rye are below the 51% needed. So it's a very elegant whiskey. It's a bridge between a bourbon and rye to us. It comes in a little sweet, finishes a little with a spice. What we've done here now, this is our toasted barrel finish sour mash Kentucky whiskey, okay? So we would have fully aged it 5 to 7 years and then removed it from the cask and entered it into a new toasted uncharred American white oak barrel for a short amount of time. So that toasting, remember, is low temperature and time. It helps break down the layers of the wood. We actually tried several toasting profiles with this, and we selected a more milder toast profile to bring out some of the fruity characteristics. Whereas if you pick like a higher toast profile, you can bring out like mocha notes, coffee, things like that. Since this was a little more elegant, we chose a lighter profile. You'll see the caramels are stepped up on this, buttery vanilla, toffee. And then as it comes across your palate, hopefully you'll experience some of that toasted notes that we were striving for. It's a very nice, smooth whiskey. Okay. 9 left? Okay. So I know some people may like whiskey that has a lot of, kind of that bite, right? And that's what's beautiful about whiskey in general. No matter whether you like American whiskey, Scotches, Japanese whiskeys, so forth, there's something for everybody. But again, this is our take on it. This is Michter's. We want that nice, flavorful, smooth whiskey. And again, I hope, I'd love that everybody walks out of here a Michter's fan, but I understand. I mean, but that's the beauty of bourbons too. If you go to Kentucky, you're going to get ones that do have that bite to it. And this is just our Michter's style. Oh, I just smelled the microphone. I always say this, guys, I truly come right out of the distillery, so I know I look great, but I'm not a paid spokesmodel, so you get what you get. I normally wear work boots, and now I'm here, so. I talked about our distillate. Another thing that's very important to us is, one of the best places to make whiskey is Kentucky, and the reason I say that is our resources. Of course, we have the limestone water and so forth. We have the skilled, distillers. We have resources of people that understand how to sell the whiskey, manage the whiskey, so forth. But the climate, we have the changing of the seasons, which heat up the whiskey, cool down the whiskey. Every time that happens, we call it a cycle. So when the whiskey heats up, the pressure inside the barrel increases, drives that whiskey into the capillaries of the wood. When it cools down, it's extracting those flavors, right? That occurs naturally about 4 to 6 times in Kentucky. So in the wintertime, when it's kind of cold and the temperature's like at a lull, we'll close the windows, the louvers of the building, and we'll heat up the building. We'll increase the temperature inside the barrel, pushing it inside the wood, and then once we experience a certain temperature change, we actually then shut the heat off, open the windows, and let it naturally cool. We're duplicating Mother Nature, basically. We feel that this adds about 6 months of maturity for each year that we're doing it. Of course, we can't put that on the label, but we have data loggers all throughout the warehouse. We have people with over 40 years experience leading this. And so very few distilleries heat cycle. It's very expensive. Our angel share increases over a non-heat cycled warehouse. But again, we feel it greatly affects the final outcome. And if you ever just see our whiskeys, they're beautiful in color. So there's a lot of color and flavor extraction occurring throughout that aging process. So again, this is very, very important to our overall process. So let's go to the last one, our last one. This one is our 10-year-old single barrel Kentucky straight bourbon. This one is 47.2%. All of our whiskeys in our 10-year lineup have always been older. Our 2019 release is actually over 13 years, which is very exciting. We've never just put 10 years in a day. We're a distillery that, again, releases on taste profile, not an age statement. I love it when our president of the company says, if I worked for a publicly traded company, I'd be fired. And I agree, because I do come from a publicly traded company that it was about quality, but it's also efficiency and so forth. And here, there's things that he allows us to be slower or cost more to achieve the final outcome. So, and it's very exciting. I mean, if I distill a whole day's worth of distillate and it doesn't pass our specifications, whether off the GC mass spec or our sensory panel, we actually fail that distillate and send it conveniently enough across the street to another facility that repurposes it into fuel ethanol. Again, I mentioned our final products are either single barrel or small batch, so if that, we don't have that ability to blend in some of the maybe off barrels, so it has to be right. If it's not, it won't work at the end. So I'm excited to share this with you. If you haven't had it, it's a very nice bourbon. Again, everything's increased, the proof's increased, the complexity is increased. And yes, sir, it's not going to be that. It's still very nice, smooth whiskey. As one sales plug, we're on the far side of the building, and we have a lot more of expressions that if you'd like to try over there. We even have the 10-year rye, barrel or cask proof rye, things like that. So please come over. But I'll just mention it shortly. So one last thing, I guess everyone has their opinion of how you should whiskey should be filtered. There's always some sort of filtration that occurs, whether you say non-filter or chilled filtration. We call it a skillful chilled filtration. So yes, are we trying to move some of the fatty acids, things that'll keep from the whiskey, the chill haze, the flocculation, if you've ever seen a cloud in your whiskey. Is it bad? No. But aesthetically pleasing, it's not either. So we do want to prevent that from happening. But the next thing is all of our expressions are filtered differently. There's a lot of time and resources spent ensuring that each expression is well balanced. You have long chain molecules that are going to be more dominant, and you have small chain. And this is just a high, elevation view of it. But we want to let some of those lighter aromatics shine through, and I think it shows that in the whiskey, whether it's fruity, floral, things like that. So that's why we believe in a skillful chill filtration for our whiskeys, which is very important. So how are we doing, John? 3 minutes. Are there any questions? Let's see what, small batch. Again, in the United States, there's no legal definition. It's just, some people may do 500 or 1,000 barrel batches. If they do smaller, it can be their small batch. We've elected to go with 20 full barrels. One thing I wanted to mention, again, in our mash bill, we don't release percentages, but it is of corn, rye, and malted barley. All three of our grains are non-GMO and U.S. grade number 1, meaning the highest grade according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So we feel like we're starting out with the highest quality ingredients right at the get-go. These are the products we tried today. And merci. That's my French for today. Merci. Merci. Thank you. On a serious note, I appreciate it.